I've always felt that movies are the best way to explain real life issues. Like, we see a bunch of movements that strive to do good, but they're not really getting their message across efficiently. It's always hard to express what you mean to others, and it's always hard to visualize something if people don't really understand it. And that's where I think certain movies are the perfect outlets to show what you mean. I recently saw The Post, and I thought it was fantastic. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to be talking about the acting, the cinematography, the directing. All of that is great, but there's two particular things that I want to break down. One is Meryl Streep and her story arc and how it's this like woman empowerment story. And the other one is about telling the truth and sticking to it and, you know, like fake news and all that stuff. And kind of related to you two. I'll start off with the female themes. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and like demand respect? Like they demand for you to give them a chance and you do, only to figure out that they actually don't have anything to offer? It's one of those weird things in where, you know, there's a lot of movements out there and I question all of them. Even the ones that I do agree with 1000%, because it's like there's this very thin line between actually following what everyone says they're following and then you having ulterior motives. Like everyone having to follow, you know, believe in one thing, but there needs to be a label to it. Can be very tricky because those people who say they're a part of that label and use the hashtags can be doing something else for their own ulterior motives to get attention, even if it's at the detriment of others. Rest in peace, Aziz. What I love about The Post is that it ain't about attention. It's about empowerment. Streep plays Katharine Graham, whose father was actually the one in charge of The Post. He owned it. It was a family thing. But when he passed away, he passed it down not to his blood, but to his in-law, her husband, which is kind of bogus. But what's crazy is that Katharine doesn't like feel resentful. There's always this idea that, you know, playing the victim card in a sense, like they don't know what to do. She was actually kind of like happy that her husband got it. She loved her husband. She thought that he was the perfect candidate because he was so beloved and everyone loved him until they don't show it in the movie, but it ends up being that he's a cheater, had mental issues, and commit suicide. So she ends up with The Post, and what's so interesting about it is how you follow her journey. Throughout the entire movie, you're seeing all of these different obstacles that she has to face. They tell it through a bunch of shots and where it's always her surrounded by men. She goes to the stock exchange and all of the women are outside as she enters a den of power-hungry men. When it's finally up to her to make a decision, every dude is hovering over her, trying to pressure her, and at the end, when she finally makes that decision that puts her on the map, you see the impact it made for all the girls who are now given a role model to look up to. But what's crazy is that she didn't have a role model. She was the only one in the game doing that, and she did it. Not fearlessly, because she was nervous. This girl was shaking like crazy, and a lot of people think like you have to be this fearless leader when you know, become this idol. That's what I think made this movie so intriguing and why I believe, and I always will say this, that movies do a better job at displaying issues that we have in real life, is that you actually see her as a human. It humanizes this person. You're following with her and you're not seeing her as like a victim or anything. You're seeing her as someone who you can actually root for, which I believe many times becomes a big obstacle with a lot of movements when they want to get their message across. But people just can't feel it. There's then the side of the fake news, propaganda type things, which in the movie, Graham makes the big decision to publish the Pentagon Papers, which spoilers for a real life event. And that not only leads to the Post getting recognized nationally and having other local papers get influenced and follow suit, but it eventually leads to the freaking Watergate scandal that they covered. Of course, there's a lot to say about how it relates to, you know, authenticity and, you know, newspapers doing what they're supposed to. And it's crazy because we're in a world where obviously most news cycles, most newspapers, source outlets, they all kind of have a bias. And what's insane is that even the ones that side with you lie to you for whatever reason. But there's enough articles about that, you know, that you can read about with the Post and, you know, news and the presidencies and how they're together. What I want to talk about is a little bit different. See, for me, what stood out was something towards the end of the movie where we get a look at all of the papers being printed and all these big, massive machines and the cycles that they run in order to be able to get these newspapers out in time. We see the sweeping shots of the writing desk and all these writers who have to hurry to be able to get the news stories out and printed for the people who are all getting their news from a newspaper. It's crazy how much things have changed, and what was really interesting was hearing a guy coming out of the theater and talking about those being the good old days when you had the newspapers and you were able to get everything from print. And, you know, I think about how whatever we have now in a couple of decades, we're going to be saying the same thing he is. Remember the good old days. Like, I'm an editor, so I know all of those old school things that were used for editing, like the Moviolas and the Steenbecks. Like, now I don't need to like process film and literally cut the frames out. I just open up Premiere. Does that mean that one is better than the other? Not necessarily. I just think that it's different times, and while I think obviously one is easier than the other, there's always going to be new things that come out, but it's just another form to be able to get information out. And that's what's so interesting about this day and age, because we don't really use newspapers. A lot of people don't even watch the news. We pretty much get all of our information online, from articles, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook. All of those have become our go-to news cycles, but pretty much those same principles from the Post still apply. We're still in an era where when we watch something, we have to question, are they manipulating this so we can side with them? Are they emotionally trying to get with us? Are they omitting things because it's not going to help their narrative? I think about even more than just the news cycles, entertainment, about trying to clickbait you to get something, about trying to side in a way so that people will like it and share it, you know, over liking something, over hating something. There's a lot of different incentives that people have, especially when, you know, your livelihood is off ads, so they stretch things out, and it gets to a crazy point, especially when you have to decide, when you're able to cover everything, what should you cover? What should you give the attention to? And recently, you know, there was a big issue on YouTube where a lot of people were covering it, and I found it to be so intriguing because not everyone fell into this, because, you know, some people really wanted to cover it from the perspective of making a change, and all the attention that a Paul brother got was able to temporarily get him out of a sight. But what was crazy was the amount of people who were sickened by what he did, yet profited by making multiple videos that had AdSense to make money off of it. It's crazy when you look at these people who like utterly complain about bad movies, who utterly complain about all these crazy dumb people online, yet you notice that that's their bread and butter on their videos. That's what they make their money on. It's intriguing. I mean, I get that we all have to make money. I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that at all. I've done several videos where I don't care about the movies. I just knew that they were trending, and it makes you miserable working on stuff like that. But you always got to question the purpose of it. You know, like when a 22-year-old blogger overly insults other feminists because they didn't pity their hit piece, it makes you question that purpose. Because if what they're doing is really just to hurt other people, then this movement that you claim that you're with, you're actually silencing and making it worse for those who are trying to come out and speak. There's a scene at the climax of the movie where Meryl Streep finally makes her decision that even though she's had friends in the government, even though it could ruin them financially, even though they could go to jail, she reminds them that the purpose of their paper was, as the judge sums up at the end, that the press was to serve the governed, not the governors. Crazy thing is that I know that probably half of you aren't actual journalists or reporters. Most of us are probably YouTubers. We're tweeters who tweet tweets. We're people on Facebook who probably always answer the what's on your mind question and post constantly. But there's a question that I think all of us should ask ourselves before we publish whatever the post is that it's supposed to be. And that's something that Meryl Streep brings up at the movie. And that's questioning why you're even posting in the first place. And I don't think a lot of us do that.